She didn't call me. I'd like to go ahead and call the February 6th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Can you hear me in the, it doesn't sound like, Emily, I think it's on, but it's not up. Okay. We'll go ahead and start with the mundane parts of the meeting. The first item on the agenda are the minutes. Commissioners, you got those via email. Have you had a chance to read them?
No, we just gave them out.
Okay. If you'll take a few moments and read those and see if you have any additions or corrections. I'd like to also introduce our new planning commissioner, Wayne Dias. This will be Wayne's first meeting with us. Wayne, if you could introduce yourself, would be great.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, my name is Wayne Dice. This is my 4th day with the City of Fairhope. Proud to be here. Excited to get to work here and help the city move through these times of growth and development and do the best job we can. Some of you may know me. I was with the county for 10 plus years with Baldwin County as a planning director. From there, I went to Walton County, Florida, which I'm now leading coming to Fairhope. But again, I want to do the best we can to help navigate through the development and growth pressures. They're always difficult. They were with the county, they were in Walton County, and we're going to do the best job we can, as professionally as we can, and give you the best advice we can as far as going forward with development. So anytime you guys need me, give me a call. I'm glad to talk to you anytime about any projects or anything we're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Also, we have Kenneth Watson. He is our attorney and will keep an eye on us and have a button he'll press if we get led too far astray. Maybe I'll have a shot collar in the future to make sure we don't do anything wrong here. But thank you so much for being here, Kenneth. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any corrections or changes that need to be made on the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor to approve the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
I'll abstain because I wasn't here at the last meeting, Mr. Chair.
We've got that. Emily Bob Clark is going to abstain. All right, first item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider the request of Larry Chasen to rezone property from R1 low-density single-family residential district to PUD, a planned unit development. This property is located on the west side of U.S. Highway 98, across the street from the entrance to Rock Creek. For those of you in the audience, I will let you know that this is a PUD. A PUD is basically a zoning. It's a specific zoning that the applicant is requesting. In this case, the Planning and Zoning Commission, we do not have any authority over this. We look at the PUD application and listen to what's said, and we simply make a recommendation to the City Council to approve or not to approve the PUD. And ultimately, the decision of this PUD, just like the decision of any zoning, will rest with the City Council. So, Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property, as you touched on, is zoned R1 in the city. It's our low-density single-family residential district. Of course, R1 requires minimum lot areas of 15,000 square feet, minimum lot frontages of 100 feet. Anyway, it's not as low density as it may sound. But anyway, the property is in the city of Fairhope. The project property consists of approximately 53.94 acres. And per the applicant's narrative, there are 17 lots platted currently, and that would be proven by deeds and different things like that. The applicant's requesting to rezone the subject property to PUD, Planned Unit Development, as you mentioned. On October 5th, 2015, the applicant presented the Planning Commission with an informal review of 2 potential development designs consisting of multifamily and commercial components for the subject property. The response from commissioners and surrounding property owners was unfavorable for both plans presented. The applicant met with Montrose residents and came back before the commission on March 7th, 2016 for additional feedback between a traditional R1 layout, a cluster design, or a combination of the 2 styles. The residents objected to proposed improvements and additional traffic on the existing right-of-ways. The commissioners recommended more buffers and natural green space be incorporated and the character of the surrounding neighborhood be maintained. The plan currently under review appears to embrace the concerns of the commission and the residents. Based on the comments received during the informal review process, the applicant has redesigned the site and the proposed layout. It consists of 77 single-family residential lots in a cluster-style design. The street layout, I will mention, is not consistent with the city's vision or requirement of connectivity, but due to concerns of the citizens in Montrose and Baldwin County officials, I believe one of our county commissioners spoke out against opening those right-of-ways to this development. The current street design is proposed. The PUD provisions in the zoning ordinance provide for flexibility in design, so that is one thing we can cite here. There are multiple buffers, and there is an abundance of green space and open space shown on the plat. There's also a walking trail throughout the project shown on the PUD plan. Although major subdivision developments are currently under a moratorium, staff recommends approval of the proposed PUD contingent upon the following conditions. I'll go ahead and lay the conditions out here. The buffers shown on the plan shall remain natural with the exception of the allowance of plant materials to be installed where a visual buffer does not exist. Where a visual buffer does not exist, where buffers are shown on the plans, buffer plant materials shall be installed, and any outside agency permits required shall be obtained. That would include permits from Baldwin County, ALDOT, ADEM, et cetera. I'd also like to add one more condition for the record, and that is anything that's not specified in this PUD application or in the PUD ordinance, that the applicant shall comply with all applicable city regulations that may be present. So if something's not specifically stated in the PUD as what they want to do, they'll have to come under the city's typical guidelines. So they've pretty much covered most of that, but I just wanted to make sure that was in there so we wouldn't have any confusion later on whenever they may propose something that might be a little out of the ordinary.
Do we need to include that in our motion, or is that already in the subdivision ordinance?
By me saying that, if it's in the...
I will yell from now on. And my question was, is that in the subdivision ordinances, or is that something that we need to make in the form of a motion if we pass this, if we recommend this tonight?
I would put it in the motion, but, it would be standard practice if it's not specified within the PUD ordinance that we would go back to the city's regulations that govern development, which is the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak on behalf of the developer at this time? No, this is the developer's time to speak right now. I've got a list with 5 names when the public hearing opens, and I'll call those 5 names up at that time, and then if other people wish to speak, we'll let other people speak at that time as well. Yes, sir.
My name is Stephen Pumphrey with Dewberry Preble Rich, and I'm representing the application here. And also, Mr. Larry Chasen, the applicant, is here with me tonight also, and he would like to speak toward the end and kind of wrap up, so I'll do the presentation, unless you need him to come up before then. Not to repeat everything that Jonathan has told you, you already know the acreage, and you already probably know more about this site than I do because I was not part of the earlier meetings on this when it came to the public. All I can tell you is what we're presenting now. I'm going to give you that. If there's questions you have, I'll be glad to answer those, and I know Mr. Chasen would be glad to do the same thing. But bottom line, what we've tried to do, we've now before you with a total single-family development, no commercial elements to it at all. They're all single-family lots. There is a mixture of lots, and the concept was to, hopefully everybody will understand, was to move as much as we could within the development and creating buffers around the outside of those lots. We do have 6 lots that are rather large lots, what we're calling a state-size lot. They're over an acre in size. Those lots are over on the west side of the development against Main Street, divided by a ditch that you see that's a common area there between those 6 lots. Those are the large lots. The rest of the lots are all 60-foot wide lots varying in depth. And again, with the idea that we've created a new roadway. The idea was not to open any of the existing right-of-ways that are in place. And so the only one we have opened is the access point that we're using to the development directly across from Rock Creek subdivision, which is a lighted intersection. Obviously, we'll do modifications there for our entryway, but that will be the entrance to our site down to the roadway that we propose to develop through the middle of this development, basically running north and south. We're proposing a total of 77 lots, and that density comes out to roughly 1.4 units per acre, which I think most would agree is a relatively low-density type project for residential development. There are a lot of green space, which is where you're going to see the buffering between the lots and the perimeter of this property. Most of that is going to be left in, when I say most, a large portion of it's going to be left in its natural state. Some of it will be what we'll call formal parks, where we'll come in and clean them up and have lawns and landscaping in them. There is a trail proposed throughout the development for walking purposes in addition to the sidewalks that we're proposing on the streets, on our existing street. So in regards to what Jonathan said earlier, I think that you have the narrative we proposed. We did put forth a number of items that we would like to request as part of this PUD approval, and understand if we haven't requested it here, then obviously we're going back to the R1 zoning, the underlying zoning, I believe is how that would work. If I'm correct, Jonathan, we'd go back to the R1. So we have listed things like, and I'll cover them just so that we're all sure we're on the same page as far as what we are asking for outside of your subdivision regulations with this PUD. And I'll do it as quickly as I can. The biggest items are things like setbacks. On these 60-foot lots, we're asking for 25 front, 25 rear, and 5 foot on the side. Unless it's the street side, we'll be 15 feet from the streets. The estate lots would be your typical 30 front, 30 rear, 10 on the side. 35-foot building height, which I believe is pretty much in the norm for what you have in your subregs now, so we're not exceeding that. We are asking for a 40% building coverage. We are allowing accessory structures in the rear yards only, and I think that what we're asking for there also complies with your subdivision regulations. Other than that, most of what we have would follow your typical subdivision regs. We are proposing to meet your regulations when it comes to the LID standards and utility type thing. Nothing unusual with any of that. Roadway, I hope everybody understands we are asking for a PUD tonight. We're not proposing any drainage design at this point. That'll come when we do the actual development design. We'll have obviously full construction plans for drainage purposes and at that point. So that's generally it. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, and then if you need me to come back up after the public speaks and address any of their concerns, we'll be glad to do that.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. One thing I'd like to mention to the public is this is a PUD application again. If they come under R1 and their plan meets the R1 requirements, we pretty much by law have to approve it. The nice thing about a PUD is with a PUD there's some give and take, so this is a time that really the public input is the most important in the process that we have here in this night. I've got 5 people listed, and the first one I will call up will be Debbie Quinn. Oh, and Debbie, just so everybody else, when you come up, please say your name and your address so that we can put you in our public record, please.
Hey there, Debbie Quinn. I live at 7172 Taylor Street. And if you look on the map, there's about 6 streets in Montrose that are unopened to the 4-lane, and mine is one of them that actually right now dead ends into this particular property. So we want to thank Larry, though, or I do, for working with us. This is our 3rd trip to see you, and it's been an interesting experience. I'm so glad that he's been able to listen to the city and listen to us about concerns. The small area up at the top of the traditional neighborhood design that appears, I know that most of those houses could be between 2,500 and 4,000 square feet. but at least they have setbacks. They're not zero lot line, which we had kind of talked to him about, which means that there's some green space. And with all the rain that we have, we all know about stormwater. We also want to thank him for the added buffers. He didn't have to add the 10 feet around the perimeter or down Ledyard, which doesn't exist at the moment, and then along the 4-lane. I think that adds a lot of buffer to the existing community and the 4-lane, and then plus the visual buffers that Jonathan talked about. I know our biggest concern was about opening the streets to the small lanes that we have already in Montrose and having to carry all that traffic. I just want to make sure that I understand, I think I do, but for everybody else, that in a PUD, if they want to come back and open any of those streets, that they'd have to go through this process and the city council because it would be a change in the PUD.
That's absolutely correct.
Whereas if it's a straight zone, all they have to do is just get the county or whoever owns the streets at the time to want to open it up.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the conservation easement he has at the far south end is great because it will help with the stormwater runoff and also with the watershed that is huge in that area. But I do have a couple of questions, and one is, he can answer these when he comes back up, is who's going to accept the conservation easement? What entity will be holding that easement? I know the city doesn't hold easements like that, so who will be doing that? And at the appropriate time, because we have such a huge amount of drainage issues, especially on 3rd Street, a lot of the people there are drowned with just the cemetery being there. They've had to put in tens of thousands of dollars worth of erosion measures just because of the water coming off the cemetery, which this is going to be harder surfaces than the cemetery. We'd really like to look at maybe a third-party review of the drainage when it gets to that point. And then who is going to maintain the trails in perpetuity? I think we all want to see what's best for Montrose, for our friends, our neighbors, people we live with all the time, and we know this property won't stay undeveloped for very long, especially with everything that's growing in us, around us. But I feel it's the best of what we can be given at the moment, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. The next person on our list is by the name of Thomas. James is lined out. Is Diane Thomas? Is that it? Thank you, Ms. Thomas. And again, if you'll state this is Diane Thomas, and if you'll state your address for the record, please.
23389 Main Street. I don't have many different things from Debbie. I want to thank the Thomason family and Larry Chasen for listening to the people in Montrose. And I think most people would prefer that the property never be developed. That's not going to be the case. We understand that it's zoned for R1, and they could have developed the whole property and opened a lot of streets. So given that that is our alternative, I feel that this is really a good compromise. I wanted to ask about the entrance to the estate lots that we have over here. Can y'all see those? The ones that face Main Street, where is the entrance to those lots? I can see the entrance to the back 3 lots. And then I'm like Debbie, it's really important to us as to who holds the conservation easement. We would like to see some organization that's sort of in the business of conservation do that, not an individual. And I had a question about sewer. And I know right now that the city sewer system, we're looking for a study. And, you know, that's something to be considered down the line because there will be 77 houses in there. Those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you. The sewer and the drainage issues will come up at a later date. They won't be addressed tonight. This is more the schematic aspect. The water and sewer study would come later if this PUD is approved by the city council. Is Linda McCullough here? She's the next on the list.
It's Linda McCullough, and I live at 7388 Taylor Street. As a resident of Montrose, I personally am not in favor of changing from the R1. and I do have a question or two. My biggest concern is changing a piece of property of this size to a PUD, because the way I understand a planned unit development is it can be most anything. It can be condos, it can be commercial, it can be apartments. As the Publix area behind there has had this problem, that at one time was approved for one thing and then they came back and asked for something different that the people certainly were not in favor of. So that is one of my big concerns. Again, the sewer I know would not come up till later, but that's another concern. If the city of Fairhope is able to supply sewer service, and what about collection? The other thing is part of this land that is going into a conservation easement, which is great, and I love that too. But that land is mostly unbuildable or would be very, very expensive to build. And I understand that the people who own the property need to get as much money as they possibly can for that property. But that still is a concern of mine as to where the drainage is going and what creeks, Rock Creek, Fly Creek, that we're going to be having runoff water in. I know we get a lot of runoff just coming. I'm at the other end of, Debbie lives on the corner of Main and Taylor, and I live at the other end, right next to the property. And we already have quite a bit of water running down from Main Street. It's a slow, gradual decline, but it all comes down toward our property and runs across our property. So that is a concern. The other concern I have has to do, Taylor Oaks is a small subdivision. We are in the city of Fairhope, as this property is in the city of Fairhope. And 2nd Street, where the backside of those estate-size lots, they're showing it dead ending there. But there is already a trail from that property to Taylor Street. And our concern would be the opening of 2nd Avenue, which would dump onto Taylor Street and then onto Main. And I don't know how the city would be with fire, police, ambulance, that kind of situation with just one entrance coming in for those 72 houses at that particular one entrance. So those are my concerns. And my very last, I have a question. If the PUD is approved for a PUD, does the PUD have authority over the county? Because those are county right-of-ways. Would the PUD take precedent? Could they tell the county, you can't come in here and open that because we told these people you're not going to open that? I mean, what is to guarantee that the city wouldn't still come through and open our streets?
That's more of a legal question, not for tonight, of
Okay.
what would allow the streets to be opened or not opened, or who would want to open if the
Right.
development was already done. But
All right. Well, thank you
that's
very
in the
much
state.
for hearing my concerns.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Is Russell Brown in the audience?
My question's already been answered.
All right, thank you, sir. Bless you. Is Martin Pitts in the audience?
My name is Martin Pitts. We live at 7225 Eckord Duchesne Court in Montrose. It's the property just south of the estate-size lots. I want to thank Larry and the Thompson family. I thought they did a really good job. This development, which I'm in favor of, gives us good access to our property, which fronts on 2nd Street. You'll notice it does also front on Main Street. We access it from Main Street. But we need to access it really from 2nd Street as well, because there's a drainage way, a very serious drainage way, that has to be maintained, and we have been maintaining it for the last 20 years or so. So we're going to need access, continued access, one way or the other, and this gives us that access. So I am in favor of it.
Thank you very much, sir. Right now, I've got the questions to ask the developer when he comes back up. Who will accept the conservation easement? Who's going to be in charge of the trail maintenance? How are the estate street lots going to be accessed? And preliminarily, has anything been done as far as any kind of drainage study? Are the questions I currently have for the developer. Would anybody else, does anybody else have any other questions or concerns? If so, come up and please state your name and your address, sir.
My name is Wayne McCullough, and I live on Taylor Street. Mr. Pitts was just up here. We're talking about 2nd Street coming out onto Taylor Street. I don't know if you gentlemen have ever been on Taylor Street or not. It's about 30 foot wide, maybe. If someone's coming in, you have to pull off in the ditch to let the other car go by. If they do open 2nd Street and it comes onto Taylor Street, you only have Debbie's property is from 2nd Street to where you come out on the main street. So what would be done about that? As far as widening or getting people out of there onto Taylor Street onto Main Street, if you have access from that direction and you have 74. I know the ones on the other side will go, but if it becomes easier to come around, I'm keep knocking this thing down. If it becomes easier to come around and come out the other side, and surely everybody's not going to go out the other way. If like Mr. Pitts says, they have to open 2nd Street and dump it onto there, who is going? I know the county owns the road. One meeting that we were here, they said they didn't have the money to pave the road. They wanted to give it to the city. City would not accept the road because it's not really a road. I mean, it's a road. It's kind of like a small drive. But I'd just be interested to know, are they going to widen that right
I'll
there?
ask about the plan. You want to know specifically the plans for 2nd Street, and do they plan to open any more of 2nd Street?
If they open 2nd Street, it dumps onto Taylor Street. And it's only about, I don't know.
The drawing to me, I can't speak for the developer, but the drawing to me looks like it's got a hammerhead there at the end, but I will ask that question when the developer comes up.
That's where Mr. Pitt's property is right there, and that's what he just said, that he needs access on 2nd Street out to Taylor Street. So if you come to Taylor Street and then you turn to go down to get on the main, you know, the streets, they're 30 foot wide.
Right.
So that's what I'm concerned with.
Yes, sir. I'll ask
How we get in, you know, in or out, because the cars can't pass one another on that little street right there. Something's going to have to be done. That street belongs to the county, and you know, they're not even patching, much less paving roads.
Yes, sir.
So okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Klutz, and I live not far from the McCulloughs. My property backs onto Taylor Street. We're part of Pleiades. I'm actually at 108 Allsway Court. But our small neighborhood, Pleiades, is a little cul-de-sac that dumps onto Taylor Street also, and I share the McCulloughs' concerns that it's not made to handle more traffic than goes on it now. So it would be a significant point of concern to us if 2nd Street were to be open to access the back end of this development. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Debbie, do you want to?
I think I need to clarify Martin's comments. I think what Martin was trying to comment on was that with the new road through the development, he'll be able to access his property through that road and not 2nd Street, correct? So 2nd Street wouldn't be opened. it tees off. But he'd be able to jump on to that new road and get out to the 4-lane. That's what he meant to say, or meant to clarify.
What are the new roads you talking about?
The new road within the division itself. So where the big conservation easement is, there's a little bitty, there's another lot in there that you probably can't see. And he'll be able to access it through the new road through that lot. I don't know, it's hard to tell in the little picture.
Martin, is there a structure built on the lot that's behind you?
Yes, sir.
Who does that belong to?
Talking about between 2nd Street.
Sort of a parallelogram looking lot.
We own this lot, which faces 2nd Street.
All right, anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's who you only spoke with.
My name is Lynn Barnes. I live at 23950 3rd Street. 23950 3rd Street. I have two questions for the developer, and maybe this has been addressed previously. So these lots, will patio homes be built on these lots? Or what type single dwelling will be built? And at what price point?
Okay, we'll ask about the type homes, but we can't ask about the price point. That's out of our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Clay Rankin. I'm the president of the Taylor Oaks Property Owners Association, and I'm speaking for the people that live in the Taylor Oaks area. We are concerned generally about where we stand with this whole matter. It appears, as we understand it, that the people who own the land have got a agent and developer who presented a plan. They want the property to be rezoned R2. That's what they're asking for.
No, sir, they're asking for a PUD.
Yes, sir, but they're asking for a PUD, but are they bound by this particular plan they've got here? Is there any reason they can't sell it to somebody else and change the whole structure of the thing?
This PUD would become a specific zoning. That's not to say they couldn't come back 100 times, once a year for the next, millennium to request changes. And at that point, the city council has to decide do these changes improve or, make it worse. So there's no law in Alabama against requesting a change in zoning as long as, your statute of, times once it's changed, there's a certain time you have to wait. But once that time's up, they can come back as many times as they want.
Well, and so our overall concern has been stated here, and that is that once the cat gets out of the bag on this whole business about 2nd Street, my property and a number of the other owners of the Property Owners Association actually back up to 2nd Street. And then we have Taylor Street coming around the corner. We are vehemently opposed to any sort of development that's going to end up exposing us to opening 2nd Street. That's what it basically gets down to. And so for that reason, since we can't get any kind of guarantee that nobody's going to come back next year and try to open 2nd Street, we're just against the entire thing until somebody can give us some reason to feel that we are more secured in terms of not having a vast traffic flow coming through our very small little subdivision.
Well, Mr. Rankin, you're an attorney, so I don't want to speak law, but to you, and we've got our attorney here. But one thing that I like to say is there are certain legal rights that people have to open public roads. And if someone comes to us with an R1 development that meets all of the subdivision regulations, everybody in here can hate it. Nick Saban can hate it, and so can Gus Malzahn and Santa Claus. And we still have to approve it by law. Otherwise, it goes to court, and we get a judge's order to come back to approve it, which I've had in my 17 years on here twice. So I've learned my lesson twice and don't want to waste the city's money on that in the future. So probably the best thing, if you're for those roads not being open, is to support a PUD, and I'm not saying I'm in support or not of this PUD, because one of the questions I want to know is exactly which ones of these roads they're opening, because I see some, T's here that I want to ask questions about. But if their PUD doesn't show a connection to Second Street, for them to connect to it, they'd have to come back with an additional PUD. So at least that way you would know, where if you listen to what Ms. Quinn said, if they do an R1 zoning, they could go in the middle of the night to the county and say, hey, the garbage men are complaining coming in here off of the road. What do you say we pop this baby open and have, access from both directions? So my thought would be, if you're really concerned that, the PUD is where you have the give and take, one of the things I don't care for about this is, with the connectivity, I'd love to see it go through Second Street to Highway 98. However, I've been through there plenty of times. I understand the uniqueness of those roads, and if you widen those roads to the county or the city specs, you'd be killing so many oak trees and beautiful trees, it would change the whole character of that neighborhood. So even though that one principle is probably lost on this PUD, that's where kind of the quid pro quo comes in, that even though you don't have the connectivity, your neighborhood, based on this, wouldn't be destroyed, and what you're terrified of happening would not happen due to this PUD, because its access is all off of Highway 98. That's not to, say in some future point that maybe the county commission, comes to and decides, hey, let's open every single county road that there is just because we feel like it, like they did all of the connections going down to the bay about 30 years ago. But as far as this PUD goes, I'm going to ask the questions of which streets they plan on connecting to. If they don't plan on connecting, they would have to come back and make a change, and at least that couldn't be done behind your back in the middle of the night, and you'd have the city council to, request that does not be allowed.
Well, thank you very much. I see that you understand our concerns.
Absolutely. I've been down there plenty of times, and it's a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood that y'all live in. It truly is. Would anybody else like to speak on this item? Yes, sir.
My name's Larry Lindsay. I live at 7245 Rock Creek Drive. All of the hard surface water runoff, is it going to be funneled into Rock Creek?
We're not going, we're not discussing the drainage at this time. That will come
we're
back
not?
later. But I
Okay.
will ask them if they've done any preliminary drainage.
Okay, because the guy across the street from me is down real low, and that property's flooded out a couple or three times over the last 25 years, and that's without all this. So if we got all this extra hard surface runoff going into Rock Creek, he might as well just pack up. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
My name is Stephen Cook. I live at 7335 Wild Oaks Road. And the answer to that question is that all the water will run down to Rock Creek. Anything from Sibley to Parker Road all goes down to Rock Creek. All that water will be going out to the bay. That's without a doubt. Water doesn't go uphill without a pump. I live not at I'm living at the corner, the southwest corner of the green space, the bottom space, and that's where I'm on the creek, Rock Creek. I've always seen bottles, fertilizer runoff, and oil coming past my house on the creek there. Now, why can't we leave it as a low-density, single-family residential district? Why not? Why can't we? I mean, that's what it is to begin with. That's what it is right now. We don't have to approve it to be a planned unit development, to leave it as it is. I understand the owners want to make some money, and I understand that you have a legal right to do certain things that you want to do on your own property. I understand that. But we're going to have a lot more traffic on 98, a lot more traffic on Scenic 98, both 4 lanes, both 98s. We're just adding and adding and adding. I think you ought to just leave it as a low-density single family right now and come up with a plan for that. I don't think we have to go to this planned unit development, PUD development. I don't believe we are. We don't need to. So I'm against it.
All right.
I think you ought to just leave it the way that it's written right now. We don't have to approve it.
Can you tell me your name again, sir?
Stephen Cook.
Okay. Mr. Cook, I will ask them the difference in the density of this R1 versus if they came in under, of this PUD versus if they came in as, I will ask the developer the difference between this density that they're proposing versus if it were left R1 and see if they have an answer to that question.
Right.
So.
I assume that it's going to be about 75 homes is what I've read and seen up here.
That's correct.
So, I mean, there's not one person living in a single home. I mean, so that's not 75 people. Usually, we're talking at least 300 to an extra 400 people living there.
Right. It's 1.4 units per. It's 1.4 units per acre. So I'll ask and find what that density is compared to the normal.
So we're just looking at more people coming down the road. I just leave it like it is. That's my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Smith. I live at the corner of Adams and 3rd Street, southwest corner. So I deal with cemetery water. You may have answered this question, but is this going to be septic systems, or is this going to be sewer, or has it been decided?
This would be sewer, I'm sure. I'll ask the developer, but I'm sure with the size lots, it would be required.
Well, that was my point. I wasn't sure that
you can't have lots less than an acre
that was my point.
septic, so it will be sewer.
Sewer. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and ask the developer to come up. I've got about 7 questions for you, and then I'll see what questions Stephen, you may want to come up also and sit in the front seat just in case there's an engineering aspect. But the first question is, who are you planning on transferring the conservation easement to?
Could I make a few comments before we get in? I've gotten the questions written down, and I'll answer all the questions.
Sure,
but I
that's
would
fine.
like to make a few comments I think might help with some of the questions.
That's fine.
First of all, I just want to compliment Dewberry Preble on the job they did on this. I want to compliment Dewberry Preble Rish on the job they did on this development. We had many meetings, and we talked a lot about the character of the neighborhood and the uniqueness of the property. And I think if you sit and look at this thing as long as I have, you'll see a lot of little small things that are there that you don't normally see. Some of those buffers, some of those green spaces, the attempts they made to take the lots and remove them off the highway to cut down on the traffic noise, the things they did to remove the streets and the houses from the existing houses, using those streets, those buffers, and all those natural areas. The walking trails that they put in, the things that they did, I really feel like they did an excellent job. I also want to thank all of the residents that I met with. This has been ongoing now for more than a year, and I've met with large groups and small groups to try to, hear their concerns and to try to keep all of the information on this particular project factual. And I appreciate how the give and take, there was a lot of good thinking and a lot of good ideas that came out of it. And I think this whole planning and development thing is a process. And when you get everybody involved in that process and you get input from everybody, this is the type of development you get. And I think this you see the results of those meetings in these plans. I also want to say that to the last gentleman's question about density, the way that came up, when we came in, as Jonathan mentioned in the beginning, with just showing you how it could be laid out as an R1 zone, the density permitted under the ordinance was around 80 units. So essentially, that's where we came up. We could have put more lots in here, but the idea was to keep the density of this PUD and the existing R1 zone the same. Also, this is a part of what the people that have been involved in planning for a while will understand as smart growth, and we'll get more into that as we present a plat. I am not developing anything. The owners are simply putting this into a mold of what they feel is compatible. It will be for sale in that manner and in that manner only, as you pointed out. If there were minor changes, there might be, but we're not anticipating any minor changes. The 1.4 units per acre is one of the lowest densities that I've seen in a while. We have over 30 acres of open space, natural property that we're not disturbing around Rock Creek. On the house sizes, I got asked that question a lot. You know, people are concerned. I'm not sure I agree with the idea that a big house means a better house or a small house means a not good house. I'm not sure about that. But I do know that given the 40% coverage that we asked for on the smallest lot, the bottom floor could be as large as 2,760 square feet. You would permit, according to your ordinance, up to 2.5 stories. So the house on the smallest lot could run over 4,000 square feet if that's what somebody wanted to build. On the, not the estate size, but moving up to what I'll call the larger of the smaller lots, the 60 by 150s, you could have 3,600 square feet on the ground floor. So there's nothing here that would indicate these would be patio homes or small houses. The prices that will be charged for these lots are going to dictate that these are going to be larger, nice houses, consistent with what's already in the neighborhood. The point has been made about the drainage and the traffic and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be at the preliminary plat level. That's not something we're here tonight. And I do want to point out that I do appreciate the fact that we got a favorable recommendation from your staff. So if you've got questions, be happy to answer them.
One of the biggest concerns that a lot of people had is the opening of the streets. You've got the schematic. It looks to me like there's a hammerhead at the end of lot number 65 and 71.
Exactly.
If you could answer that, let everyone know what part of Section Street and Ledyard are open there, and then also how the estate lots would be accessed.
Okay, thank you. That was one of the biggest concerns when we brought in the cluster-type development the last time we were here. One of the biggest concerns was the roadways. You know, what are you going to do with the roadways in Montrose? We propose to build our own road system coming off of Highway 98 at what is already currently a signalized intersection. We will cross over some of those unopened right-of-ways, but we don't plan to use or open any of those streets. The whole issue of the hammerhead was at the request of the county and some of the citizens saying we don't want people turning off the 4-lane and driving all the way through to the 2-lane. So we put the hammerhead in the back. Mr. Martin's property is south of our property. So if he was to want access to his lot, he would be better off utilizing the road system that we're putting in till it comes to the terminus at the hammerhead. He would then turn south. He would still be on our hammerhead for a distance, and then there'd be a very short distance from there to his property. That's not our concern. We don't propose to open that. We're only going to pave what you see in our road system that we have there, and we're not asking or opening or soliciting any of the existing right-of-ways in Montrose.
Normally, I would really love to see that connected, but I understand this is a very unique situation, and the people really don't want those roads widened, and I can totally understand and get that. I think that's one reason a PUD could be appropriate here. We had questions about the trail maintenance and also the conservation easement as well. Who would accept the conservation easement?
There are more than one way to do that, and we're open to that. But I think the most straightforward, simple way to answer that question at this point is to say that there would be a property owners association in this development that would pay a fee to maintain the trails and they would be responsible for the conservation easement. It would be under their control. There are other things that could be discussed, but that's the most simple, straightforward answer I could give you tonight.
All right, I'll go ahead, and the public hearing's already been closed. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the developer?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You're not going to actually build, you're just setting the lots up to be given out to somebody to build houses on, is that correct?
Correct.
Are you going to have any design guidelines that are going to go along with that when you bring people up to potentially take over a lot to build?
We are, because we anticipate that this will be done in phases. It will not be done all at one time.
Sure, of course.
And we would want to protect our interest in future phases, so I'm sure we'll have an architectural review board and we'll have a seat on that.
Second question, who is the easement going to be granted to, the conservation easement?
At this point, it'll be the POA. We'd be open to discussions if the city of Fairhope wants to talk about maintaining it. We'd be open to that. But the one thing I can assure you of here tonight is that the POA will be capable, and that would be in their best interest to make sure that they understand that it will be maintained, because it will add significant value to their homes to have that.
I may have misunderstood, Larry. Can I interrupt you for
Sure,
one half
please.
second? When I saw conservation easement, I thought you were actually donating a conservation easement to Forever Wild, Weeks Bay Reserve, or one of those organizations that would give us comfort that that land would never be developed.
That's
Saying
right.
it's going to the POA, the concern that I would have
No.
is, what if the POA decides, hey, let's sell that 18 acres one day?
My understanding of the conservation easement is when you place it into a conservation easement, it's a lot like the PUD. You can reserve the right to control the use of the property, like establishing hours on that people can't be there at 1 o'clock in the morning or that kind of thing. But as far as the property ever being developed, no, it would not. It would be restricted in the donation of the easement, and it would be restricted.
So there would be an easement that would be granted to an accepting agency, entity of some sort.
It would be, and that would be of economic benefit to the owner of the
in
property.
perpetuity.
Yes, sir.
I would like to see, Commissioners, if we make a motion to the City Council to approve this, that we put item number 4, that the city attorney will review the conservation easement and make sure it's to his satisfaction.
I will willingly make that motion.
I have a question for Jonathan or Wayne. If we're under a building moratorium right now, why is the staff recommending approval of this?
The moratorium covers major subdivisions. This is simply a land use plan, so I don't see any reason why we should hold these folks up with their land use plans so they may be able to get started with plans for subdivision in the future. The bottom line is they're not going to be allowed to apply for a major subdivision until the moratorium's lifted by the city council, or it expires.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Did we talk about the difference between the low density and this PUD? Because that was one of the questions that we were going to get answered. One of the gentlemen spoke.
He said that a R1 would allow 80 lots, and his proposal is 75.
Okay, sorry.
I think it's 77, but.
77. And then one of the comments that I had, just as a public works director, and we run garbage twice a week to all the city of Fairhope residents, trash once a week, and recycling trucks once a week. So one of those public works trucks that are large chassis comes by everybody's home 4 times a week. That hammerhead is probably not large enough to service those 3 lots at the bottom. So it would need to be longer. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that, because that's one of the comments that I'll have during design review committee.
And for a fire truck as well, it'll have.
Fire truck.
It'll have
That's
to be
exactly
big enough for
right.
that, yes, ma'am.
I'll have to turn around, have chassis are very large, long. I'm usually a proponent of, making sure everything's connected. Second Street, we do have an issue on Forest Park, trying to get in and out of there. It's always been a service issue for the city, is we can't back up. It's hard for us to back up down Forest Park Drive. We can't turn around back there. But I think most everybody sounds like they're favorable. So I appreciate you working, with the citizens on this.
Thank you.
I had a few comments just to reiterate kind of what we've discussed regarding the density. Obviously your zone, you have 17 platted lots, but that is not equivalent to what you can actually go out there and build right now. You could build 80 lots based on the current zoning of this property.
Correct.
Okay, and that's just something I wanted to kind of reiterate for the public. So while I would love for you to build 17 houses and call it a day at that number, I understand you could go up to 80 lots and without any, without withholding, I guess, from connecting to the different streets that you would now be leaving within the PUD. So inside the PUD, you would not connect to some of these other 3 streets in Montrose.
Correct.
So those are the 2 main comparisons I see. You're going slightly less lots, and you're not going to connect to some of the roads. And the 2 biggest concerns I've been hearing from constituents was in regards to the connectivity, wishing that they don't want to see connectivity in Montrose, and drainage runoff. Now, the easement down here, I mean, that's very beneficial for people down in Trentino and that area. That's quite a large buffer. The drainage issues possibly up in Adams, Chapman, and 3rd, that area, how will that be affected? Because as you're reallocating these lots, that's pretty dense in that one particular area at the north side of the property.
Well, because those studies are going to come later, it's hard for me to
Right.
sit here and tell you. I do know that the ordinance requires that we not allow any water, additional water to leave that leaves the site in its natural state. So we wouldn't be increasing. I feel confident when I say that the development of this property and the interception of some water on properties that were developed prior to all these regulations, we probably would improve the drainage situation in some of those areas.
Okay.
Any other questions, Commissioners? David, do you have any questions? George? If not, I'll accept the motion. I think 2 items, if your motion is to approve, I think we should consider making the hammerhead large enough and also have the conservation easement be subject to be reviewed by our legal counsel. Yes, our attorney wants to say something.
Jonathan also added a condition as well.
All regulations be followed if they aren't specifically addressed in the PUD ordinance or application.
He said all regulations not addressed in the PUD be followed. All city regulations not addressed in the PUD be followed.
Got it.
You're saying all the subdivision regulations? Yeah. I can make that motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept staff recommendation. Number 4 was for the attorney to review the conservation easement to assure that we keep that in perpetuity.
That was my question. Does the commission have some standards in mind that they want the conservation reviewed for?
My concern was just that it's an actual conservation easement that will go in perpetuity.
POAs can become involved.
Correct.
But if it's just to be a conservation easement under the PUD, the PUD can be changed. I need to understand what the standard you're looking for.
Are you saying like a park? And that's what I had in my mind.
My thought would be a conservation easement that's going to go to some organization in perpetuity.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, like Weeks Bay or Nature Conservancy, something
Yes.
like that.
Well, okay. Something like the Trust for Public Land or something like that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, and then number 5, the hammerhead's large enough to accommodate the trucks that's going to be servicing the homes. Number 6, that all the subdivision regulations not addressed in the plan unit development are met. And zoning ordinance met.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, the motion to recommend approval based on these 6 items passes unanimously. That's a nice one.
You handled that very well.
I thought that was a nice one. I always get concerned when I see plans. I always think it's going to be chopped up lots, 9 out of 10 plans that come in front of us, it's like they just want 3 times the density. So when you see one that actually is a little less than the density, you kind of have to,
I just wanted to be sure that that easement didn't end up being a hedge for speculation. They hold it out for now. And tomorrow, oh, well, the easement just expired. You can't have that, because that's a huge drainage area. If anybody starts building, I don't even know how they're going to make it work out with a detention pond right next to somebody's house.
Well, the other thing, you use that 18 acres, and all of a sudden your density goes above 1, and it's totally, give a lot more than you originally thought you were.
You know some shit, Lee. I like that.
Well, I mean, I like the connectivity. You don't know where to go both ways. But like I said, those streets are so old in that area, so pretty part of controls. And you start getting those to city standards, it just changes the whole story.
It'll mix up the whole
They just kill it. So
Exactly.
that's where it floods the nice. One thing we make I mentioned to the city council when we left was we
I
just
started not to bring this thing, but I'm glad I did now.
pedestrian connectivity. Probably like city council require a little pedestrian connectivity so the people in that subdivision maybe can walk out to.
Because they're building sidewalk right across the street back and forth up in Rock Creek right now, so just a continuation of the idea.
But then
In the room, that's pretty good,
you
yeah.
know, walking bike trail on my trail. Those people here probably don't like that. So.
Maybe not. Well, that took a lot of people out of the audience.
Yeah, I found it. All right. They're up there. Those people come in droves, I guarantee you.
But you know what, that is a pretty neighborhood.
That's what we were just saying, the streets are all small and winding.
All right, we'll go ahead and get the meeting back to order again. The next item on the agenda is SD 1632. It's a public hearing to consider the request of Chris Haley for a multiple occupancy project approval for Portico, a 56-unit project. The property is located on the northeast corner of Fairhope Avenue and Brown Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application goes along with the application that you'll hear next on your agenda. The subject property consists of 3.52 acres and is zoned B2, general business, which is the city's highest use business district. The proposed project is a mixed-use project with 7 buildings and 56 units. 33 residential units are proposed and 23 commercial units are proposed. The units and buildings are clearly labeled on the plans that you have in your packets and in the city's file. All 7 buildings are 2 stories with a building height not to exceed 35 feet per the city's regulations. The applicants voluntarily continued the application twice to work with staff on issues related to the site. I'll go ahead and just list the issues that we've discussed. This project isn't new, I believe, to anybody on the commission. We've heard a lot about it. The first issue, and perhaps the most significant issue, is the city's minimum green space requirement of 20 feet along Fairhope Avenue. This is a requirement of the city's tree ordinance. There is not just a grass-green buffer indicated on the site plan, but the developer has indicated to staff, and they contend that the design proposed will end to a better transition between the central business district and the proposed development. The applicant has there's a combination of hardscape and landscape features within this area that might be the 20-foot green space area as required by the city's tree ordinance. There are a few more details in the report, but I'll let the commission read through those. The second issue relates to the proposed on-street parking. The city has asked the applicant to remove the on-street parking due to public safety concerns. They have had a traffic engineer look into that, and they contend that the parking is not an issue. But the city does still have some concerns about the parking. Staff did engage a third-party engineer. He had some comments. There aren't any comments that can't be worked out. I've spoken with our third-party engineer, Mr. Larry Smith. He's a PE with SE Civil Engineering. His comments, he's provided us with a final set of comments, and they need to be worked out if this is approved by the city council in the long run. This here is the Planning Commission's, the multi-occupancy project review that we're dealing with right now, the Planning Commission will approve, but ultimately, if the city council doesn't approve the site plan, then this can't go anywhere. But even them hearing this development will rely on the Planning Commission's decision also. So anyway, the majority of the project layout appears to be of good design. It's a very nice looking development, and the way it's laid out is something that a lot of communities would be proud of and would want to have in their community. Due to the issues outlined above, staff is unable to support the application just because the literal provisions of our ordinances are not clearly complied with on the plans, but there are some interpretation issues, and that might be something that our attorneys look into. But if the Planning Commission and City Council approve the subject development as proposed or with any changes, staff recommends all of Larry Smith's comments be addressed. But like I said, we for technical reasons, staff can't support the development, but there are some things that could be left up to interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Would anybody like to speak on behalf of the developer?
I'm Chris Haley, and I'm the developer of the project, and I've seen all you guys, I guess, last month, so you know about the project. So I won't go into all my details, but I do want to iterate I'm a local developer. I've lived here for 15 years. This is a multi-year, multi-phase project that, you know, I'm not going to come in, develop this, and leave town. I live here. My family lives here. So I want to make that very clear on the front end. The two contentious issues are parking and this green space buffer, and I'll address the second issue first. The green space buffer is in our tree ordinance. It's not found anywhere in our zoning ordinance or subdivision regs, and it's my belief that when this ordinance was put in, I'm not sure a whole lot of thought was given to this particular section of Fairhope Avenue. And by that I mean from the edge of my property across from the hardware store going up to the library. That stretch is not in the central business district, but nearly all, if not all, of the properties along that stretch don't have the green space buffer currently. Think of the post office, think of the hardware store, multiple business, the bicycle shop, all of those properties along there all have concrete parking, sidewalks. There's no true 20-foot green space buffer anywhere in there. So that's my logic for asking for an exception to that rule. When I first spoke to staff about the project, we talked about the concept of extending the central business district. And for various reasons, Jonathan suggested that we not go down that path because we didn't know how long that would take, what the process was, and because the property is currently zoned B2. So what I'm proposing, the density, the height, the types of use all fit squarely within the current zoning. So we elected not to do a PUD. It's over 3 acres. I could have gone down the PUD path, which would give me a lot more latitude with parking, setbacks, heights, etc. It's not a highly dense project. It may seem when you hear 56 units, but a lot of people don't realize how big 3.5 acres is. It's a large site. It's on the edge of our central business district, and it is, like you said, a transition from the current residential area to the east, transitioning into the central business district. I'd also like to point out that the gentleman that I'm buying the property from lives next door. He's obviously in favor of the project. He's here tonight. He has a 10-foot high wall immediately on the edge of his property. So there's no green space buffer next door. Now, I happen to think it's one of the prettiest properties in town. It's got ivy growing up the wall. It's very attractive, but it's not like we're going from residential neighborhood with 20 or 30-foot yards straight into no green space. I did meet with Jennifer Fiddler and Jonathan to discuss the green space, and at Jennifer's request, we enhanced the amount of landscaping along Fairhope Avenue. There are multiple overstory trees, ground cover. We added landscape islands around the parking. We've enhanced the look, even though we proposed hardscape, wide sidewalks, and more of the look and feel of downtown Fairhope. We have added a lot of landscaping to our original plan. The second contentious issue, if you will, is the parking. And I don't think anybody seems to have an issue with the parking on Brown Street or Stimson in the back. It's the perceived safety issue on Fairhope Avenue of 45-degree parking that would have vehicles backing out into Fairhope Avenue. At the request of city staff, I hired a traffic engineer to address that exact issue. And the posted speed limit's 25 miles an hour right there. And technically, from an engineering perspective, this meets a 35-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. And at that point, I think it even meets it by like 158%. So it's well within the safety measure from a sight distance perspective. The concern I've heard is there's a small hill you crest coming from Greeno, and there's a perception that it's dangerous. I don't know what else to do. I hired a professional traffic engineer. No offense to any of you guys or Jonathan, but you go hire an expert to tell you whether it's safe and meets the criteria, and that's all I know to do. I've done that. I do want to add that, we talk about a parking problem in Fairhope, and I'm required by code to put 130 parking spaces for the amount of square footage and residential units. The total spots I have on the site right now are 177. The nuances are that you can only count half of the on-street parking on the 3 perimeter streets. So that gets chopped in half by our current city ordinance code, whatever. And so that gets me right. If I were to lose all of Fairhope Avenue, I'd still be right at 130 spaces, which is the technical requirement. I, as a developer, am willing to, at my expense, put 29 spaces along Fairhope Avenue to supplement the parking. I think it's important for access to the businesses that I hope to attract in the commercial spaces downstairs. I think it's in keeping with what we have in downtown Fairhope. And I've hired a traffic engineer to tell me that it's not dangerous. And so that's sort of my position on the traffic parking situation.
Anything else?
I've got slides. If we get into more questions, I've got slides with the landscaping and the parking counts, et cetera.
Okay. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing up, Chris, and then call you back up after that. I've got one person. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I've got two people listed. The first is Tony Taylor. Tony, if you'll come up, and I guess you may want to say in this case your business address, not the one on that. I don't have a volume. I'm sorry. I'll try to speak up.
All right. I'm Tony Taylor, owner of Jubilee Ace, 560 Fairhope Avenue. Well, of course, my issue is the parking on Fairhope Avenue. And at first, I thought maybe something was going to be done, but from listening, it is going to be on Fairhope Avenue. My issue is the 18-wheelers that serve the store. And the biggest problem to me is going to be not the east side, but the west side up toward Brown Street, where the median's at. For the 18-wheelers to pull in and get up there by the median, when they have to make their turn, right now, some of them jump up on the median. We've clipped the mailbox, and they rub the crepe myrtles. Now, if there's vehicles there, it's going to be even worse. And if I have to, I'll talk to the city. Maybe we do something with the median that's up there, but just the traffic, the parking right there toward Brown Street is going to be the burden on us. That's it.
Hey, Tony, can you show where Chris knows, can you show where the 18-wheelers is, the median between you and this proposal, or is it on the other side?
It's up.
Chris, do you understand where he's talking about? You don't need to answer it now, but I just want to make sure for when I come. Okay. All right. Thank you, Tony. All right. Bob Griffin.
Bob Griffin, 203 Fairhope Avenue. I think he answered one of them. One of my questions was, what are the city requirements for parking spaces? And does that include parking that you have on the city right-of-way, the stuff on Fairhope Avenue, Stimson, and Brown? And I think he mentioned that you get half credit, half parking place if you do it on that. That was one of them. The other one, I'm sure will be handled, but I assume you have underground retention, water retention. Is that right?
There's underground drainage going back to the gully.
Is there no?
Get all these questions?
Yeah. We'll just ask. I'll go ahead and take a list of all your questions.
I just wonder, what is the requirement for retention, or is it just drainage into the gully?
Okay.
All right, that's it.
All right, thank you, Bob. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, if not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask the developer to come back up. We had the questions. I wasn't quite sure exactly where Tony was discussing the 18-wheelers hitting the median, and then we had questions about the drainage issues there.
If I understand Mr. Taylor correctly, about his concerns with the 18-wheelers, the back end of the cars parked on the right-of-way will extend no further than the current curb right now. So we're not putting any vehicular parking out into the current road. We're talking about within the right-of-way where the sidewalk is now, basically. And if an 18-wheeler is encroaching on the sidewalk and the curb right now, that's an issue I really have no control over.
Were you talking about in the median or on the other side of the road, Tony?
So the way they have to get into the west gate, they pull in and they get the truck up past the median. Now, when he makes his turn, coming toward the gate, the truck swings, and sometimes they get a tire up on the curb, and they'll scrape the crepe myrtles, and then they've got their straight shot back into the gate. Now, if there's vehicles there, that's going to be, they can't run over a vehicle.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Myrtles he's referring to are located between the sidewalk and the curb.
All right. What about the drainage in this area?
Well, one point I failed to make is that if you're familiar with the site, you'll understand that there's a lot of impervious surface now, and what I'm proposing is actually an improvement to the impervious surfaces there. We've got pervious paving for the parking areas. We have a very large green space in the center of the project that's a big enclosed courtyard, and so we'll actually have less runoff than currently exists, and we will be putting all new underground drainage, directing the water to where it's going now. But so we'll be actually improving the amount of runoff on that site.
Okay. And that water ultimately goes into the gully, doesn't it?
Correct.
Will you have any water retention that you do, or are you just not going to add any sensors?
Well, we've got 7, I think, LID techniques, and a lot of that gets over my head, and Chris may want to come speak to it, but it's bioswales and rain gardens and a lot of things that are in our ordinance.
So a combination of less water runoff and the
LID techniques.
And the LID technique should make it better, in other words.
Correct.
Okay.
Is that stating that correctly?
Do you want to mention the LID techniques y'all were able to utilize?
So the 7 techniques we're going to utilize for this, we've got a bioswale in the main courtyard where he was talking about. We have a few rain gardens in between the buildings. Most of the main parking lot is going to be pervious concrete paving. So all the rainwater that hits there will go through the pervious concrete paving. We have green space buffers. We have grass swales that will, take some of the sediment out of the storm water. And those are all the techniques we're going to use.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question about your surface water. In the last meeting, we talked about there's surface water that comes through there, from the watershed. Have you studied that and made sure it's adequate?
So what we've done is, you had mentioned that one building has flooded a few times, I guess on the east side of that existing drive. Our finished floor will be higher than what is existing right now. And if a 100-year storm were to come through, there is that driveway is much lower between those two buildings, so there'd be adequate conveyance through that driveway into the back inlets if needed before the buildings would flood.
Okay. And the existing system, the city of Fairhope has never maintained the existing system. I'm assuming since it's on private property that you know that and you're aware of that. And are y'all going to camera that system, make sure it's good? Or?
Yes, ma'am. We're going to run a camera through it, and then, we'll present the findings to the city, and then we'll go from there.
The other question, I noticed that, and I hadn't noticed this before, the parking that is proposed on Brown and on Fairhope Avenue, a portion of it is actually on private property, while most of it's on city property. When we have that occurring in town now, the private property owner has signed the area as private property. How is and I would, since it's on public property, I feel like the public should be using it. However, seeing that portion of it's on private property, that there's a chance that it could be signed. So I would not be, I would say that's not a good for the public to accept that parking there, because part of it's going to be private. Was that the plan, or did you public?
First come, first serve. I really hadn't even thought about it.
Okay, because that's
Reserved parking. I was under the impression it's all city right away, and it would be.
a portion of it is private, according to this layout that I'm looking at. So that would, and then the green corridor, for the greenway that's supposed to be on Brown and on Fairhope Avenue, of course, I'm being the city horticulturist, that portion in the tree ordinance was put in place to protect the green corridors that are in town and to provide that canopy that we're seeming like we're losing, and that makes Fairhope a special place with our canopy, our greenscape. The development itself is superb. The green canopy and the green corridor is what we're losing when we're not making sure that green space is in there. Maybe perhaps, the commission might consider, 25% hardscape and 75% green, in canopy. But, the I just feel like the tree ordinance, we should be supporting a green corridor and canopy. And that's speaking as the city horticulturist. And again, the parking next to Fairhope Avenue, even though we have the experts that say it's okay, I just still question the safety coming when we have the westbound traffic coming into Fairhope. People seem to speed through there, and I'm afraid it might be a problem.
Any other?
Mr. Chairman, I have just an observation. I had written down
during the presentation the phrase backing out on Fairhope Avenue. Now, is this going to be, this development as proposed here, that there's going to be a lot of people that are using it that will be backing out on Fairhope Avenue? Is that how they get in and get out of the facility? Explain that to me.
So across the front of the property, meaning Fairhope Avenue, it will look just like Fairhope Avenue does in the middle of town. 45-degree in parking, not too dissimilar from across the street at the hardware store. They have 90-degree in parking. They're in sort of a weird situation where about half the traffic tries to back into the road and the other half kind of does a little three-point turn just because of the depth right there of the right-of-way. But yes, the bulk of the parking for the project is in the northeast corner. There are 109 parking spaces in the northeast corner of the property, and then there are 45-degree in parking spaces along Brown and Fairhope Avenue, so the western boundary and the southern boundary. And then on the northern boundary, there are 20 90-degree in parking spots. Is that clear? I mean, we've got drawings here, or I can come up there and show you on the...
This will be in addition to what's there now, or
Well, what's there now, people kind of park between the sidewalk and the buildings in a parallel manner. Sometimes people park behind the buildings, and there's a large section of mini warehouse storage units that really don't have any parking associated with them.
Chris, I want to applaud you on the design. I used to walk by there when I lived on Fairwood to work every day when I used to walk to work, which you can tell I don't do now. I need to start again. But to me, when you look at Fairhope, that's one of the least attractive areas in all of Fairhope, if not the specific least attractive area. And to me, what you're doing, I think the most attractive area in Fairhope is downtown. And everybody says keep downtown, central business district, protect and promote it. And I think this fits in perfectly. I don't have a problem with the 45-degree. We have it at the library now. I don't see any issues. I wish it could get in front of the gas station and the post office as well, and just bring that whole area in and get that whole area looking as attractive as downtown Fairhope. I love the way you've got the LID. And to me, I'm not going to argue with the engineers. The engineers say that the parking's safe. I believe them on that. But I like the way that you did this layout and have it resemble what most people love about Fairhope, which is the downtown area. Rather than now, it's just awkward. You don't really side park. You kind of park up here. You got some little trees, some dumpy buildings, and it's just hodgepodge. I think you've done a fantastic job. And as long as our council and our folks say that we're not violating any rules with the tree ordinance, I've got no problem supporting it at all. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Chris, as I've told you before too, I think it's a nice looking project, and I also do not have a problem with the 45-degree parking. If it was straight in 90 where you could go both directions, I would, but being it's 45 and you back out and you got to go to town to get out, I think it's good for the other business folks in town too. You got to go through town to turn and do something, so I don't have a problem with it.
Chris, I just had a quick question. I mean, it looks like you're increasing the green space quite a bit. Percentage-wise, how much more green space you're adding compared to what it is now?
What's there now? Are you talking basically the difference in impervious surface, what's there now versus?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have that percentage, David. If you look at it just from a layman's terms, the center. This will give you some perspective. This is an architectural rendering as if you were looking from across the street at maybe the western end of the hardware store. So the center courtyard there is, I think, 300 feet or 200 and something feet by 100. It's a large space, and it's all going to be grass and landscaping. Right now, that's completely impervious. It's many warehouses, roofs of many warehouses, and asphalt. And so that alone is an improvement. And then the northeast corner, you really can't see in the rendering very well. That's a look at the courtyard from the north. Yeah, there you go. So this is a landscape rendering that I had Troy Strunk do. And you'll see the green space in the middle. And on the northeast side of the property, you'll see the parking. There's lots of trees, grass, ground cover plantings in the median between the parking spaces. And that's all got pervious pavement.
When you say that all has pervious, is that just the parking spaces or the drive as well? Because the drive looks regular with the parking spaces looking pervious.
This rendering was done a while ago, but the engineering plans have been changed, and the drives and the parking spots are pervious now.
Yeah, well, you'll see a lot of people do the drive paths and asphalt and the actual parking spaces and the pervious pavers. We're doing that whole area. It's a significant enhancement to the current impervious pavement and runoff and rooftops compared to what's there now.
So
But David, I couldn't tell you a percentage right now without sitting down and calculating it.
It looks like a huge increase, though. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I think it's a great project. I think it's an improvement aesthetically. I think it's an improvement environmentally with all the green space, and economically too, bringing something new and fresh to that area. I mean, that's sort of one of the first things you see if you're coming west on Fairhope Avenue. You cross over Fairwood, and that's there side by side with the post office before you get to downtown. I don't have an issue personally with the 45 on parking or the green space, because I drive that area fairly frequently, and I don't think you pick up that green space until you cross Fairwood Avenue and Fairhope, that intersection at the Cooper's house and moving eastward. Everything else is kind of commercial in that area, so I have no issues with it. My only concern would be, I hate to go against a staff recommendation. Are these things that could be addressed and cleared up pretty easily tonight, Jonathan, or?
Well, I mentioned earlier, there are things that can be left up to interpretation, and,
Okay.
We have to kind of sometimes use a little bit of common sense, and, if that's the way the Planning Commission and Council want to go, then they can make that decision. But me, as a staff person, I just felt like I had to go with the absolute literal provisions of the ordinance in the most conservative manner.
Yeah, Jimmy, I knew coming in that I would probably have to get city council approval for the right-of-way parking, because it's not really accommodated for, because I'm kind of in no man's land. I'm not in the central business district, but the nature of this street is kind of like the central business district, so it's just sort of an unusual situation, and that's why I've designed it the way I have. I've come to you guys with, I guess, if you will, some waiver requests or things that are a little outside the box, but I've had this property under contract since May. I started meeting with Jonathan, I think, in May. I've been on the agenda and off the agenda 2 or 3 times to address some of these concerns. I brought my landscape architect and met with Jonathan and Jennifer to enhance the amount of landscaping on Fairhope Avenue. And look, it's in my best interest to have it nice green space, nice trees, wide sidewalks. I think maybe you've seen a couple of pictures of a project that's similar in Montgomery that you'll see wide sidewalks, tables, trees along the front. That's an early picture of that development. It's matured a lot. They've got ivy growing up the building. Those trees are much larger now, and it's my intent is to have something that's an attractive addition. This is not downtown, and I get that. It's removed 2 blocks. And so I see it as a little bit of a destination development. If people are going to come shop there or have their office there, they're going to drive to it. And that's why I want the parking in the front. I want it to look nice aesthetically. There's demand for office tenants in Fairhope. Jimmy, you mentioned the economic impact of that. I know that's really not in your purview, but it is an enhancement to the city. It drives tax revenues, et cetera, et cetera. So I've tried to think of all those things when we design this project, and hopefully it's a successful design and something you guys can sign off on.
Commissioners, any more questions? Yes, sir.
The buildings that you show us, I don't see any signage. Do you have any idea how you're going to handle the signage for the buildings that are going to be facing the avenue or the ones that are in the courtyard that are commercial? You're going to have some guidelines drawn up?
To be honest with you, I don't have a signage layout, a signage plan. I envision the commercial spaces along Fairhope Avenue would obviously meet the sign ordinance for the city, but would have signage on the door, above the door. Certainly, we have a fairly strict sign ordinance in Fairhope, as you probably know, and I would obviously comply with that. There may be a need for some directional signage or monument sign at the corner of Brown and Fairhope Avenue to direct people to certain parts of the development. I anticipate that a good bit of this commercial space will be office based on some of the preliminary phone calls I've received of interest. Law firms, ad agencies, those types of businesses, professional, who may not need as much signage as a retail establishment.
Thank you.
If there's any further questions, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve as presented.
May I please make one more comment? If you do that, please also mention that you approve the request for the waiver to 10 LID requirements. They're incorporating 7 per the design, so
Okay.
just make sure that's noted in your
Yes, sir.
motion.
So go ahead. I know it sounds like a technical point. It sounds like the commission is intending to grant, or at least consider granting a waiver from the green space that apparently isn't satisfied here. So you can grant a hardship exception under your subdivision regulations, but it requires a specific vote. So if you're headed that way, you want to first vote on giving that waiver or exception and then move to the order.
Okay. Do you want to make a waiver for the exception? I'm going to make a vote for the exception.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we accept a waiver based on the fact that he's implementing so much green space in the interior of the project. I think it offsets what we're losing on the front.
And the LID.
And the LID.
I'll second it.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay.
I have to say no.
One no. You got that, Emily, Jennifer, and I think the no abstentions, though. So, any further motions?
Lee, is this for both multi-occupancy and site plan, or are we doing a whole nother hearing?
This is just for the SD 1632.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we go ahead and approve,
Yes.
based as noted.
Second.
I've got a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay.
No.
Okay, passes 7-1. All right, the next item on the agenda.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that would also be with staff's recommendation that Larry Smith's final comments are satisfied.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct, David, the motion. Yes, okay. Next item on the agenda is the same property. This is a public hearing request for the multi-occupancy project approval of Portico. Property is located at the northeast corner. Well, we won't have to go into all that again. Jonathan?
I have the exact same report, so I don't think I need to go back over it. It's the same exact issue, and this is just another part of the process.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Okay, well, mine says public hearing, but that's fine.
I apologize, that's my fault, the way I wrote it up.
No
I actually
problem.
wrote that it was a multi-occupancy project review.
That's quite fine.
And
No problem.
I apologize.
Does anybody wish to speak to this item? It's not a public hearing, but we certainly like to let people speak if they have an issue. Yes, sir.
My name's Gary Gover. I live at 300 Lincoln Street. It occurs to me with the diagonal parking that this will have some kind of an impact on bicycle traffic along Fairhope from east to west. So I'd like to see that there is some kind of a consideration for bicycle laning or some appropriate treatment in that regard. Thanks.
Good point. Yes, sir. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
My name's Chuck Earp. I'm just a citizen, private citizen.
Can you say your address for the record? I'm sorry, Chuck.
I'm sorry?
If you could just say your address for the record. I'm sorry.
550A Mershon.
Thank you. Thank you.
With regards to the diagonal parking, the only thing I'm going to say is if you go to the red light right by the post office and you turn left and go by Faulkner, that the way those huge trucks are parked and the way people walk out in between them, I can't tell you the 2 or 3 times that I've almost hit people. And the way people scream down Fairhope Avenue coming both directions, and we all know they do. I know it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, but they don't drive 25 miles an hour. We see it at the store all the time. And all I would say is if there's any way to get maybe deep, just a little deeper, so that people can see a little better. I don't know how to say it so it makes sense, but if you go up there and turn left and go on Bancroft, from between there and Greer's, that's all you need to look at. Because, I mean, it is absolutely a death trap. And somebody's going to get hurt right there real bad. I just don't see that right there. We already have to watch real close right there where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, yes, sir. All right, I'll go ahead and turn this over to the commissioners. Chris, do you have anything to add at this point on this next agenda? All right, commissioners, do I have a motion on this item?
Does that have to have the same hardship or whatever?
No, it does not.
You're just recommending approval of the site plan. You don't necessarily have to state that you're granting any type waiver because it is what it is. If you approve, or if the recommendation is to approve, that's what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
I just want to say again that the parking, and I did talk with you, we're going to be doing a comprehensive plan for downtown that will, and I mentioned it to you Friday, that we're going to be working on this and ordering it. We are not going to just do parking because it's the way it's been done. It is a hazard right now. We do have wrecks almost every day, and right in front of my store. This is a huge liability. And this is not like Ace Hardware because there is plenty of room to do a 3-point, getting into traffic. And if you have that on both sides, I just think you're going to exacerbate a problem that already exists. That is the only thing I have a problem with this development. And I think that we can be creative and work with you on parking, but I absolutely believe that this parking on this road is a danger. And it's just going to cause accidents. I mean, 90% of the vehicles that drive in Fairhope are SUVs. You cannot see, exactly, you cannot see past somebody when you're trying to back up in traffic. This is, I'd say at least 10 to 15 miles faster than Section Street. And I think just pull the reports from the police. I mean, we literally have wrecks or almost wrecks every day. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. Now, does the developer have anything to add at this point? Commissioners? I'll entertain a motion. Yeah.
All right, just one more thing. You know the way the parking is with the store now, the city approved it, it's been fantastic. And I know it takes up some footage like what they want to park there. But that's been a big asset for us with what the city did from our parking lot. The accidents, I don't think there's been one since the city did that.
I'd like to just say something about the bike and pedestrian lane. We did, when we restriped Fairhope Avenue, we tried to leave enough room for bike lane on both sides of Fairhope Avenue. So there are, it's, even though if it's only 2 feet over there, there is supposed to be an unofficial bike lane that's westbound and eastbound on Fairhope Avenue. Yep.
Of course, the professionals said that even at 35, the 45 would match even at 35.
Yeah, I didn't bring the traffic study with me, but Jonathan may have it, but it's about that thick, and I paid a substantial sum of money to have this guy who is a deemed expert in traffic, and he's an engineer, told me I'm well within the standards for 25 and even 35 mile an hour speed limit there. You know, the vehicles will not encroach any more than the back of curb now, so I'm not putting vehicles out in the roadway compared to what's there now. I don't know what else I can add other than it sounds like we have some differences of opinion on what's safe. I don't know. I hired an expert to tell me if it was safe or not at the city's direction, and I was told it was safe. A civil engineer right here that designed the project tells me it's safe. I don't know what else to do.
Hey, now, I do have a question. And I guess, Jonathan, Chris, if you were to turn that into parallel parking, can you reduce the count that's required for the total parking spaces? I mean, would you be open to that? Turn it into parallel, you can still get your bike lane in potentially, and then you wouldn't have the in and out that you may be subjected to now.
It's my opinion that a parallel parking, to me, it's safer driving down Fairhope Avenue to the middle of town than it is Section Street, because people are always trying to go in reverse to parallel park, and I've seen many near rear-end collisions because of parallel parking. Again, I don't think any of us in this room are experts on traffic. We hired an expert, and he tells us what's designed is safe. And so, I hate to keep repeating the same thing over, but we've got multiple engineers to tell me it's safe. If we have an enforcement problem, then we need to put the police out there to enforce the speed limit. Again, that's not something I can necessarily control. And I think I've designed it within standards, and what I'm asking for is reasonable.
And that parking is not needed to meet your required number of parking. You've already got that covered in the back.
I made that point earlier. I've got enough parking on the site to meet the minimum requirements.
Okay.
At my expense, I'm putting more parking spots on the site, and we all talk about Fairhope having a parking problem and the nuances of that and whether people will park in the deck or not, and talking about creating shuttles around town. I'm going to have an abundance of parking on this site by design. It's in my tenant's best interest to have parking in front of those storefronts and offices along Fairhope Avenue, and I think it's a reasonable request and a safe design.
Do I have a motion? No? Yes, sir.
Well, you know, I brought the issue of parking up the last meeting we had. And I like your project, but I hate the idea of this backing out parking on Fairhope Avenue. You may have a traffic engineer that'll tell you that it is not dangerous. I could probably find you one that will tell you that it was. So, you know, we can be the battle of the experts, you know that. What concerns me, and I look, the way that Mr. Taylor's operation is, you can back out over there, but there's a larger area. You can turn your car around, and you can see what's coming a little bit. You're going to be backing directly out into the right-hand lane. And this gentleman who just spoke a minute ago, the speed limit on Fairhope Avenue is ignored, believe me, by me, for one. But one of the things, yeah, there I go. There'll be a phone call tonight.
The chief's going to be calling you tomorrow.
But what I'm saying is, I really think your project would not suffer if you took that parking out of the front there and put it in the back. I think that you probably would have an #1 project, and I like it so much I'd vote for it, even with that damn parking up front. But I do it with a heavy heart, to be honest with you.
Lee, I'm confused. So we had a public hearing, and we voted on, was it site plan approval or multi-occupancy approval?
Multi-occupancy.
So now this is site plan, and I guess I'm kind of confused why parking didn't come up in our first conversation, and we had a public hearing and had multiple come speak at a non-public hearing, and now it's become an issue. I'm just not sure how the dynamics of that have come to be.
Well, I mentioned parking, backing out on Fairhope Avenue.
Sure.
On the last project. That's the thing, the presentation, I'm very much like you are. I like the presentation too, and the only thing that jumped out to me was this backing out on Fairhope Avenue. And I'm in that area every day. I have a post office box at the post office, so every single day I'm down at the post office to get my mail. And I drive in that area a lot, and I'm very familiar with the traffic over there. And I just the backing out on Fairhope Avenue, to me, is a concern. I mentioned it before. I voted for it after nobody else seemed to find it to be a problem, but now it's come up again, and I just wanted to say that that's the one thing about it that concerns me, is backing out on Fairhope Avenue. There's a lot of backing out on Fairhope Avenue now, too much almost as far as I'm concerned, but we got to have it.
I like the additional parking spaces that we get, just like we got on Delamar, making it one way with this 45 parking. That's why I didn't say anything earlier. And if there's a speeding issue, let's put some speed bumps on the road and slow the traffic down. And a lot of times putting that 45-degree parking does slow the traffic down, and at least if you have a wreck, you've got the front against the back and not somebody pulling out parallel parking that gets T-boned on the side. But anyway, I have no real issue with it. I just think the more parking we can get anywhere in town, the better, personally.
I make a motion, we approve it.
No second.
As presented.
I've got a motion, a second to approve as presented. Any further discussion?
Well, the motion is, could that be reread? What is the motion?
To approve as presented. In a second.
And that means that Larry Smith's stuff is going to be in there?
That's already in the prior.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. And any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
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 We've got 2 nays, correct? All right. We got that, Emily? All right, perfect, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a final plat approval for Southtown Point, a 6-lot subdivision on the north side of Pecan Avenue and Section Street. Bob, do you know about where that neighborhood is?
That's pretty close to where I live. It's for the benefit of other people who might not know exactly where it is, it's where the old radio station towers used to be.
Yeah.
Right.
They should have called it Tower Heights
Yeah.
instead of, what did they call it?
Thank you.
Southtown Point. It should have been called Tower Heights. That's the only suggestion I would make.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Nancy.
Okay. The subject property is located in the city of Fairhope and is zoned R3, high-density, single-family residential district. The preliminary plat was approved in September 2016. The property consists of approximately 2.4 acres. 6 lots are being proposed, with the largest lot being approximately 0.44 acres and the smallest lot being approximately 2.26 acres. And we've had the final inspection on this particular project, and what came out of the final inspection were some comments with regards to the notes that we need to address on the plat, clarifying this particular property has an existing pipe that's a city pipe on it, and then also they've done some accommodation for the drainage on the developer's end, which would be considered common area. So anyway, mainly the notes are to clarify things with regards to those pipes. And the other issue that came up was the landscaping. Typically, we don't bond common area landscaping, but this is a very small development, and there were some issues with it. So we, staff, I talked with Jonathan, and he was comfortable with the applicant bonding the common area landscape on this particular development.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Nancy. This is a public hearing, isn't it, Emily? All right, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Is somebody here on behalf of HMR? Here? Okay. Just in case we need to ask any questions, I'll go ahead at this point and close the public hearing if nobody wishes to speak to this, and turn the meeting over to the commissioners. If you have any questions, we do have a representative from HMR here to answer those.
I got a question. HTP pipe, did you put any on the site?
Not in the city right away, there's some on the property.
Do you mind coming up to the microphone just to make sure we get it in our record?
I just asked if there was any HDPE pipe on the site, just because we're not favorable with HDPE pipe. It's over the years, it's a plastic pipe has started collapsing.
I see.
There's a short section of HDPE pipe that stubs out between lots 2 and 3 that drains the low area in the middle of the property. The only other pipe that was installed on the site was a long section, and that's concrete pipe.
Okay. And that's all, maintained by the POA eventually?
Yeah, the HDPE pipe will be. It's on the property. The pipe on sections in the right-of-way, so that'll be maintained by the city.
Okay. That was the only question I had.
Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion approved.
A motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? And that's to approve subject to staff recommendations.
Yeah,
correct?
right.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, motion to approve subject to staff recommendations and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any old or new business? If not, I'd like to thank Jonathan Smith for his almost 10 years of service to the city. 10 years as planner, almost 11. He's going on to greener pastures at another municipality that will later be named. But I certainly enjoyed working with Jonathan for the years and appreciate everything he's done for the city, and we'll certainly miss you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Good luck,
Thank you,
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor say aye. There we go.
Emily, when is our next meeting?
All right.